Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Nepal and China. Do you know that all of these neighbouring countries to India are currently facing a crisis? There is a crisis brewing across India's neighbouring countries. While factors are many, there seems to be one common strand across all their problems. And that is the economy and the COVID-19 pandemic. Pakistan has recently got yet another Prime Minister. Sri Lanka is on the verge of defaulting on its foreign debt for the first time since independence. Nepal has suspended its central bank chief because of economic uncertainty in their country. And China, well, there are fears that new COVID-19 restrictions will destabilize the country's economy once again. So let's give you an understanding on what's going on across the economies of India's neighbouring countries. Let's understand first Pakistan. Once again, Pakistani Prime Minister crashed out of office before completing his full 5-year term. Imran Khan, who became Prime Minister in 2018, campaigned on the promise of establishing a Naya Pakistan. But cut to March 2022, Pakistan is now in the midst of a massive debt, high inflation, unemployment at an all-time high. After which Imran Khan faced a no-confidence motion and then he was voted out. However, the country has now got yet another Prime Minister, Shehbaz Sharif. He is now promised to tackle the economic crisis on war footing. But certainly, his job is not going to be simple ahead. Let's cut to Sri Lanka. Just like Pakistan, India's neighbour down south, Sri Lanka, is also in serious trouble now. Sri Lankans are now facing a shortage of basic items like milk, rice, electricity and medicines. The crisis in the island nation has erupted into street protests and massive violence as well as mass resignations of all their ministers. It all started in late November when Gotabaya Rajapaksa gathered his cabinet and made good on a campaign promise to slash taxes after winning Sri Lanka's presidential elections. The move included a near halving of value-added tax, also known as VAT. Shortly after this, the COVID-19 pandemic struck, crippling the country's economy, which was heavily dependent on tourism. While the pandemic-induced hit to Sri Lanka's economy was almost unavoidable, some analysts argue that policies prior to COVID-19 further aggravated issues. And now Sri Lanka is facing its worst economic crisis since its independence in 1948 and is currently on the verge of its first debt default. Nepal. India's neighbour in the east is also now facing economic turmoil. Like Sri Lanka, Nepal's economy has also been hit by a slump in tourism during the pandemic. The Himalayan country is now heavily dependent on tourism and the export of limited commodities. However, exports have been declining since July 2021, shortly after the country's political crisis, which led to the fall of their KP Sharma Oli government. Since then, imports have increased while remittances and earnings from tourism and exports have fully decreased. As a result, Nepal is now tightening imports of cars, gold and cosmetics. The government has also suspended the central bank governor and named his deputy the interim chief for now. China. While China has still managed to keep a check on its economy during the pandemic, another COVID-19 outbreak is now keeping the country on the edge. Currently, at least 23 Chinese cities have already implemented either full or partial lockdown, accounting for approximately 22% of China's GDP. This would most likely impact China's ability to export, which could eventually stoke inflation. Now, what about India? India, which reported a 17-month high inflation rate in March, has witnessed the steepest weekly fall ever in its forex reserves. The situation has resulted in a disaster for the common man. However, RBI Governor Shaktikanta Das stated that economic activity was barely above pre-pandemic levels but is steadily recovering.
For more informative videos like this, keep watching India Today NewsMo.